Yeah, a hacker, or we could also describe ourselves as internet natives. There is a lot of talking and a lot of anthropological research being done on this fact that some of us that are younger are born with a computer in their hands. I had a Spectrum ZX when I was 6. I started coding on a Commodore 64 when I was 12. Now, you can imagine kids will do even earlier. I think those are the ages, more or less, to start reading, interacting with a computer, or writing. And as many other natives, we actually constituted a little bit of a community, transversal community. Of course, it doesn't really dictate what you have to do in your life, neither professionally. This is one of the names that these communities and organizations takes. DynOrg is a non-profit, community-based organization that has now 15 years. We never really cash in on the fact that we knew what was going to happen on the network. We really kept it a non-profit until now. And we are focusing on researching what technology, what Techne, I like to call it, what the many logos that come out of Techne will do for us. And we have a relationship that is that of love and hatred, of course, with the older generation we are confronted to. Obviously, many of us are migrants by vocation and nomadic, and many of us also are Italians. But we have also something to be thankful, I think, for with the older generation, is that they built for us a place where we can live, for many of us, in peace, or at least they worked so that we could live in peace and have the luck to study so much the technology and not to worry about things that other generations had to worry in the past. What this led to is, of course, also a lot of curiosity for what are the others. Just to continue the dialogue that we have in this society panel, what is beyond the curtain, what is beyond the walls that we are building with other societies, what is beyond the Western society in which we live in, and what are the situations of conflict that we can now relate with, and what can we do also to get closer with other situations of conflict. As digital natives, we saw a colonization happening. It was clear at the time of the Eternal September, some people call it, when American Online opened the gate to the vast majority of consumers to enter on the internet. Here in Italy was Video Online. We actually saw all the space of amateur ham radio and hackers. We saw all this space invaded by a lot of people, first, that didn't have an etiquette, that didn't know how to actually interact with each other on the internet, lots of flames, lots of misuse of the communication. And then we had a lot of corporations and supermarkets being built on. It really reminds me some other histories of some other natives seeing their land being expropriated, and then commercial centers being built on top of that. So we try to relate with this kind of situations of conflict, and we did research in many places. Here you see some logos of projects that we brought with us. Streamtime, for instance, was a project that, together with Dutch journalists, I like to quote Cecile Landman and Jo van der Spek, we started to research into the blogosphere of Iraq in 2004, when the war hit that land, and trying to understand what was civil society doing, and what meant also to live in peace, what were the observations of people that struggled to live in peace, also to counteract the mainstream notion and narrative of war, because we do not only bring war to other countries, we create a situation in which we talk about war every time we talk about those countries, and this way we can never have peace, because it starts from our imagination, to imagine peace somewhere. And we had other projects, of course, tackling also the security. There you see a fork bomb, which I'm also wearing. By the way, it's a virus. It can crash a banking computer, AS400, or a Unix system, and it looks good. I mean, just wearing a T-shirt, I can just spread this virus. Right now, it's on the camera. And this is an inner message also about security and what we call security. I like to quote South Italian culture on this. There is only one sure thing in life, and that is death. The rest is marketing language to tell us that, yes, more or less, this can be secure or not. But we like to talk the reality. And often people tell you, oh yeah, your data will be totally secure with us, but then, you know, it's a matter of liability, warranty, and quantity, and evaluation of that information and how it can go. So we like to think ourselves we are part of this GNU generation, of course inspired by types like Eben Moglen or Richard Stallman that started the GNU project. And Rasta software is there also because many of us believe in freedom of creation. Back in the 2000s, we started thinking that it's not really right to have free players for everything, but not a software that let you produce something. So this separation, like real networks did, for instance, a free player, but to make a radio online, which we were doing back then, you had to pay to produce. And this was really setting an architecture in the space that we believed to be horizontal. We still believe to horizontal, that we didn't like. We want to have free producers, and so the effort of free software is also more articulated into the political effort of actually making people able to speak out without joining necessarily a corporation or having their life data mined. And here in Italy, we have also an effort that connects to the message that I really want to tell you that is absolutely, completely ignored by institutions. It lasts now more than 15 years. It's the one of the computer museum, the Museo dell'Informatica Funzionante, of the Working Computer Museum. We have a little network. One is in Sicily, in Palazzolo Acreide. Just ended up with an exhibition about old video games in Siracusa in the last month, and the other one is in Cosenza, the Museo Interattivo di Archeologia Informatica. They are two cultural associations that struggle now since almost 20 years to preserve working computers. We have exemplars of AS400, we have VAX VMS, PDP-11, Data General Eclipse, fully working. We also have the capability to recover old data from old storage things. We are absolutely ignored by any possible foundation, Olivetti, that exists in Italy or whatever to preserve that thing. And we self-rent the places. Actually, the museum is right now since 5 years, it's in a flat. You're welcome to visit them, and we think that, with this I want to make a point, we all think that we need to look at the past to also imagine the future and to not commit the same errors. The Internet of Things is potentially amplifying all the errors that we committed in developing technology in the past 20 years. Just think of two industrial protocols, how it went really bad with interoperability, also especially in the corporate sector, how things do not interoperate, how there is no clear documentation. And when I hear talking European commissioners about the difficulty to actually understand if a project went right or wrong, I immediately think, why didn't you enforce open source policies on your projects? Why didn't you enforce validating programs and reference programs to be in open source before the commercial version is built, so that we have a reference implementation that scientists and researchers can anyway relate to. This is not the case. We still struggle to write the part in European projects like Decent in which we release everything with an open source license. And this is a big point that was made also in the open hardware presentations this morning. David Quartiers, one of the founders of the Arduino project, remarked that public sector should invest money into projects that have open source free software outcomes. This not because they do not have to be commercial. Actually, companies can use them autonomously. So this is giving back some value to taxpayers rather than to a single company that wants to patent this kind of results. So this is a very important message that I think should pass here and that we didn't learn in the past. So we have a lot of incompatibilities. What happened to Nokia? That would be a very interesting discussion, I think. I'm glad that someone else quoted it because it was also in my agenda today. One of the biggest European companies that were actually in line to be still on the market today. I happen to know some of the former employees and brilliant people that went out or fired themselves, totally frustrated by the direction the company was taking. Now blame it on the fact that it has two CEOs that were really not in sync for a period. Blame it on the kind of schizophrenic decision of first developing Mimo as an open source platform and then turning they're back to it and shaking hands with Microsoft. It went really wrong for some reasons that we might learn from to not commit the same errors in the future. And this is, I think, very important. What we can learn from the past is to build consciousness in a grassroots way. And this way actually involves also business, can create new opportunities for small business to grow, and it's done also on the longer period of nurturing this kind of opportunities. And I'd like to emphasize with an approach that really looks at the grassroots. So I think that in projects that get funded and in projects that get lifted by this kind of new policies that I really am happy to hear about in case of the European Commission, for instance, the fact that now SMEs are valued much more than bigger conglomerates. I think that it's very important also to involve social sciences in this kind of research, and to involve approaches that contemplate ethnographic research on what already exists on the field. Because many times these errors that I've seen being committed in the past could have been avoided. In the hacker community, we talked about privacy by design already 15 years ago. There are a few illuminated cases in Europe in which we had actually governments doing the right move. For instance, Germany, which funded the development of GNU-PG, the free software implementation of the PGP protocol for personal encryption and pretty good privacy, back already in the 2000s. And now it's basically setting the standard, the most reliable standard. Understanding security means absolutely understanding open source and understanding the value of free software and the value of peer review. There can't be any security with obscurity. That is an adagio for hackers. If you hide it, you just try to hide it for some time, but sooner or later there will be always someone outsmarting you on what you do. That is for sure, especially on public infrastructure. So my recommendation is absolutely to look at these things. And my proposal for the Internet of Things is a project that I'm trying to nurture and graft into all the reflections. And this project sees Dyna.org, my organization involved with VAG Society, some of you might know, in Amsterdam, where we are based, and it's called DAOs. We are trying to do a few operations with DAOs. The main one is to actually bring context awareness into this scenario of the Internet of Things. Because there is one important thing that we must understand. What will happen in the IoT is that things will open contexts without our action. So our computers around, our wearables, our mobiles will open communications with other things without us telling to do so. And this means a couple of problems for the legal perspective of liability of these communications, which might happen in a place or another, meaning they could communicate with some other object, not the one they really believe in. And also it means, in general, the fact that we will become paranoid about the places where we step in. And I think that hackers believe that the internet is a place of hospitality, has always been, and also to work in the direction of peace, we have to demilitarize the network language, avoid terms like firewalls, defense, shields, and start really talking about awareness of the context and the fact that we can feel at home and we can welcome someone without being too much worried if this someone has an infected phone or computer. You can imagine these things already happen to everyone entering with a laptop in an office or a home. What will we do when people really enter loaded with information and things that start contexts without their perception? So this is a delicate field, and I think that the place where to start is not the internet, but is the local area network. Local area networks are everywhere. There is one here. We share it with the Makers Faire, and actually anyone in this local area network could just light up a promiscuous interface and start sniffing all the packets that pass on this network. Now, this, and probably having the Makers Fairs and the makers right there, I'm sure one or two are doing that just for fun. So besides telling everyone to encrypt your data, we also need to elaborate on ways to shape the common architecture in which we work and we welcome people in a way that contemplates hospitality without worries and actually makes people aware of the context in which they are, not just because of how chairs and tables are disposed or cameras, but also how the invisible communication happens and takes place in there. So these are the main goals. We plan to actually develop this as a consortium, and we hope to succeed in developing a device that can do this in a very affordable and cheap way. This is also a very non-profit oriented project for us, and do it, of course, with open source and with verifiable technology that people can correct and also make their own and appropriate. Ultimately, I like to conclude saying that open source and free software for many communities helped really, and also from the point of view of a native, to actually maintain integrity. So the problem of localizing and keeping an economy local and integral is probably solved in the moment in which you can appropriate a technology, create local businesses, create local economies, use that opportunity to create them and let them create, and on the other side, still share a research and a peer review that is global on the fact that the technology we are using can be long-lasting and can be reliable. Thank you.